Hi, Ben.
Hi, Carl.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Carl.
Oh, so good.
We always try to make it as awkward as possible, and I'm so glad you get to experience this firsthand.
Lovely.
That was an epic intro.
Yeah.
Phil, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Last time you were here, yeah, it's good to have you back. Last time you were here was May of 2023, so a lot has changed since then. A lot has happened. That just feels like a lifetime ago for me, at least. Yeah, I guess let's just jump right into it, because I was just talking to Carl about this. The thing that I took away from our episode back in May of 2023 that I've really consciously thought about a lot was the fact that you don't mute breaths, or you leave the breaths in, because people get anxious when they don't hear breaths. And then Carl proceeded to send me a song that had, like, exaggerated breaths and, like, thinking about maybe not using breaths to make people feel anxious on purpose, because that's what Carl does. But most of the music I work on is much more organic, and I've been, like, really consciously leaving in breaths to make it feel good. And yeah, sometimes I'll lower the volume of it, but yeah, leaving it in has been, like, a big thing for me. I'm curious if you've come up with any other ideas to make the music feel more organic and more real and more alive since then. Like, what's something that's on your mind that's, like, in that sort of a vein?
Oh, man. What have I been doing to make music feel more alive and more real?
Or maybe we can rephrase it a little bit and say things that you avoid doing because you know it will make it feel less alive. Like, what are some tips or tricks that, you've heard people talk about that you're like, actually, that kind of goes against the humanity of the track itself?
Well, I mean, it might be, like, kind of obvious, and maybe I've talked about it on the last podcast. I can't remember, on the last episode 183. But, like, I'm always surprised every time I'm working on music, and I work on a lot of stuff that I produce, and I work on a lot of stuff that just comes in as, like, as just the mixer, where I'm just the mixer. I come in after the production and recording has already happened. And I'm always surprised at how much easier, more musical, more connected things sound when they're recorded together. And they're not overdubbed in isolation. It's so stark because I'm constantly pulling this stuff up, and I'm working on, like, multiple songs every day. So I'll pull up a song, be, maybe some kind of, like, funky, poppy songwriter thing, and it's, like, all recorded live, and it's just like, oh man, I can put these faders anywhere. This is amazing. This feels great. And I pull up this other thing, and it's also great music, similar genre even, and it's all isolated. It was all done in, like, different studios. People are flying in tracks that I just assume, nothing, there's no bleed anywhere. And it's, like, so hard to get that to land. It's so much work, and it never reaches the same mountaintop. It's impossible. Your ceiling is lower. And I'm constantly surprised by that, even though, like, I know it's true. It still, like, smacks me in the face with this visceral realness every time I experience it. And, like, or I'll be mixing something that's mostly recorded live with just a couple overdubs, and, like, the notes I get back, they're always about the overdubs. Like I never get a note about the thing that was recorded in the room, because those things just feel right. It's always like, well, how are we going to deal with that triangle part? It's like, it's not quite sitting there. It's like, yeah, man, I know. I worked on this mix for 5 hours. 4.5 of that was the triangle. Like, I don't know how to make this work. Go back in time and hire a triangle player to be in the room with us. I mean, we ended up just turning the triangle up. That ended up being the solution, FYI.
Right. Sometimes going up is easier than going down. It's, like, subtly tucking it in.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm always surprised by that. Always surprised. And it just kind of reinforces a lot of what I believe in about, like, making music and what music is. That, like, it really is worth it to, like, do it for real. Doing it for fake, it's just fucking hard work, man. It's just hard and slow and boring and confusing. And then inevitably, it can only be like really, really good. Like I feel like that's the limit in my opinion.
Yeah, no, listen.
I think especially in styles where it's so fundamental to the DNA that it has that feel. It's like trying to make apple pie out of peaches. Like,
yeah,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with peach pie, but
no,
it's not. If you're trying to make apple pie, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Carl. Like, when I hear like something that sounds like a band playing, but it's not a band playing, it's just like, come on. Now, if we're making like ambient, minimalist German techno, maybe it's a different story. You know, that maybe has a different set of languages around synchronicity or whatever that we can play with. But yeah, it's so funny because like all recording is deception. All recording is illusion. Yet there's only so far you can go before the illusion starts to break down and tear apart, and then you start to see the pixels, if you will, of how it's all put together, and that's not a good feeling. And the worst is when you can't see the pixels but you can feel them. That's when you're in real trouble. And that's, in my opinion, 98% of modern recordings.
Oh boy.
I wanted to go back to something that Ben mentioned earlier that I want to get your thoughts on this. So Ben was talking about how, well, I don't even remember how Ben and I started talking about breaths and recordings. And he was saying about how you always want to keep them in there to make it feel more natural, which I agree makes total sense when you're trying to make things feel natural. And I was just saying to him about how, and a lot of the stuff that I'm working on, like I tend to work in much more on the gritty side of pop, like the gritty side of like pop adjacent stuff, like a lot of electronic music. And I was saying how a lot of times I'll intentionally remove breaths because of the effect that it gives, in the sense that like if you want to have breaths in to make it feel more natural, sometimes taking them out makes it feel more uncomfortable. And if that's the emotional choice of that style, then that's like the right move, right? And what I'm curious about then is, when it comes to things like the things feeling like how you can feel that visceral difference between when everybody's in the room versus the overdubs. I'm curious if you've noticed if there are any particular elements that tend to stick out to you more, that it's like if you didn't know that it was an overdub, that you can almost tell like immediately, and not because you can put it in solo and hear the bleed or not hear the bleed, but like are there things that just like no matter what, when it's not done live, it just feels off, or something where if it is played live, it feels off? It's kind of a weird big question, but
yeah. I don't know if I've come across like a pattern like you're describing.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, most of what I find falls apart when things aren't done synchronously is rhythmic cohesion. And rhythmic cohesion is like the most important like thing in most music that we're talking about. I feel like you can like be pretty out of tune. You can be pretty. The arrangement can even be kind of weak. Maybe the song can be kind of weak, but the rhythm can never be weak. Like the rhythm has to be on. And to me, like, yeah, those are the things that I find. If I'm listening to something, I'm like, why does this not feel good? I bet this wasn't live. It's almost always the rhythm that's tipping me off, more so than the like sonic texture of the like additional room tone of the bleed or whatever. It's almost always the rhythm. And when things are feeling really good, it's also always the rhythm. And it's like, why does this feel amazing? It's the rhythm. And then maybe you find out, oh, they cut that live. No, that's not surprising, because to be that rhythmically cohesive is really hard to do, or really impossible to do in an overdub zone. And the click track is like kind of like, you know, this weird kind of like averager that like does that weird thing where it like, oh, everything's okay, you know, instead of everything's awesome, everything's okay. It's like, oh, wonderful. And by wonderful, I mean total fucking disaster.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm a big believer in the rhythm section kind of is the key to like a record feeling good and sounding good. Like, and I think that's why most people these days, I think, seem to hone, other than the vocal, they hone in on like the bass, the kick, feeling really good together, the snare, like that kind of sort of combination is what glues it all together. And everything else can, you know, you barely have to touch a guitar if like if the low end feels really good, you know, like that just keeps everything feeling nice.
Yeah, to me, it's really though it's the vocal and the drums. I mean, really, it's everything. But like the vocal rhythm is like just as important to, you know, I think to like put to like weight it, WEIGHT,
I got
towards the drums and the bass. I feel like sometimes is like, I don't know, it's how I grew up learning how things work. The rhythm section, we're in charge of the rhythm. I'm a bass player. But like the more I've like been making records, I'm like, oh, that's actually not true. It's actually everybody. And in fact, the like real master drummer is the singer. And they're going to dictate vocally how the subdivisions and the eighth notes are supposed to work. And like the drummer and the bass player and the guitar player and the keyboard need to, and whoever else is in the band, they need to jump on that. That needs to be the guide. And when that's not the guide, then you have this disconnect where like, oh, the singer's expressing the eighth notes like this, but the hi-hat is expressing the eighth notes like this. What went wrong? You know? And oftentimes that, but the like downstream effect of that for the average listener is just like, sounds okay. You know, whereas when, and as professionals, we listen to it, or at least I think like, oh my God, who messed this up? Who ruined this song, this recording? Because it's really got to be you know, I really think it's the vocal and the drums. Or if I had to hierarchicalize it, I would say vocal, drums. Those need to be like together. They need to really be expressing pocket in a way that's bidirectional. And if not, we're going to be in for a long job trying to make this sound good. And I don't think it's genre specific, really. Like I don't know any genre where that's not true, where the vocal and the like primary transient rhythmic element mustn't be in conversation. Like it just has to be.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of Michael Jackson. You know, maybe just because Quincy Jones just passed away. May he rest in peace. Like, yeah, like that kind of those records kill because the vocals and the drums were so like I don't know.
Yeah, and also Michael is the most amazing breather. Yeah. Right. So like his breaths are also rhythm. And to me, like the singer, when I talk about breaths, yes, we're talking about like the act of like taking an oxygen and cueing the listener to understand that like taking an oxygen is needed because we just expelled it all or because we're about to expel a lot of air. But also the breath can be part of the music, and like a really good singer does that without thinking. Yeah. And to that same extent, you know, I think about a lot of things that happen in the studio, like the breath. I work with a lot of guitar players in the studio, and they have their pedal boards out, and like how we're touching those pedals, like the sound of the pedal going on and then the sound of the pedal going off, like the actual physical click, like we just incorporate that into the music. That's like part of it. And we're rehearsing like, okay, you're going to hit the pedal on the and of 4, but you're going to release it on the E of 2, like, because that's going to be where the right place to like bury it or let it be heard and the mics are. And same thing with like, snare drums, snares coming on and off, we're just doing it all there and we're making it into music. And more often than not, it becomes one of the cooler parts of the music. Like the sound of those snares like coming on right at the right rhythmic moment, or the guitar pedal, like, oh, what was that? Is that a rim shot? No, it's Adam Brisbane hitting the distortion pedal, like, but perfectly timed. And the same as a breath. Like the perfect inhale can be like basically like a conductor baton.
Yeah.
So
I love
It's like turning
the breath has a lot of power.
Yeah, turning bugs into features. Things that a lot of people would intentionally try to isolate and remove. It's like, no, let's curate it a bit, and let's just. I know it's kind of weird to say choreograph it, but that is really what it is. It's like, let's choreograph, then let's notate out like where these guitar pedal notes should be, because that adds to the immediacy of the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just musical. It's just more musical. Like, how can we make stepping on the guitar pedal more musical? How can we make flipping the snares on more musical? How can we make inhaling before the bridge more musical? Like, if we can get everything working like that, it just makes everything better. I mean, it just makes it easier and better. And it makes mixing easier. It makes performing easier. And it makes it easier not because like we're trying to like do less work. It makes it easier because you get to a higher peak with quicker. So it's, and that's like the thing we're all trying to do, is we're trying to get to like, fuck yeah, I love this. And like, and we're trying to get to fuck yeah, I love this on as many songs as we can.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like it's also like easier than you might think to do those things. Like you just have to focus and pay attention, and like the guitar pedal thing could just be a feel thing. But if you're not thinking about, maybe I should sync this up with what's happening in the room, you just might not be aware of it. But like once the guitarist is aware of that idea, oh yeah, okay, cool. We can do that right in that spot. And that's easy, because it's just like, it could become like, automatic.
Exactly. It's about developing like a language and like developing a set of practices that work. And yeah, so as I keep making records and I keep making them more and more like with people together in a room, I'm finding all these little kind of things that are like, oh yeah, you can totally just have the pedals there, loud pedals in the room. Doesn't matter. We're just going to music them, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because it's easy, it's more freeing, It means we can do whatever we want. Like, I don't want to like have to isolate the guitar player because they have a million pedal moves on their song,
Yeah.
So do you think
I want to isolate them for other reasons, maybe, if not for the pedal board.
This is a random question, but not a random question, but on the topic. Gavi, please edit that out. On that topic, do you think you can make a great record if you track the rhythm section live in the room, but then overdub other things? Or does like the vocal also has to be in there? Like what's like the minimum viable product for people that can't get everybody into a room?
Minimum viable product is you can do anything you want and make a great record. Like, I think we all like know that that's true. And so whatever method is working is the right method. My general philosophy, though, is like, that's true. And there are some things that are just more probabilistically better than other things. Like, it's better if we have microphones that work than microphones that don't work. It's better if we like can do this. We all know those things are just better. It doesn't mean that they like have to happen, but they just increase. So like, it's not like your record's gonna be bad if you don't track the vocal with the drums, but it will usually be better if you do track the vocal with the drums. That's kind of how I think about it. It's like, okay, we can't do it, fine, we're not gonna do it. We'll still make a great record. But it's just, I know it's gonna be a little bit better if we do it together. I mean, it just always is. I've yet to find a great singer does better singing isolated with headphones on with nobody around. I've never met one who that's true for. certainly singers who are less good, that's sometimes important, but they're going to get better. That has to do with like experience and being scared a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of see it. And so a lot of my job, not to transition us over to the other thing, but a lot of my job is to like deal with that, like I know this is a scary process. Like how are we going to get through that together in like, so that not just so like you do it because I say do it, but so that you're like excited and like as a singer to be able to sing it with the drums.
Yeah, get people in the right.
But yeah, I think minimum viable product is fucking anything. Record it on your iPhone, one thing at a time with a funk box.
And it comes down, and I would say like it comes down to what the intention is, and what this is like where that the artistic interpretation element comes in, where it's like, well, it's like you said, it all depends on what the goals are, what are they trying to accomplish, and then like whatever method they're using to get there works. And I very rarely quote drummers because I feel like that part of my career is past me, behind me. But I remember from a Jojo Mayer DVD from like 15, 20 years ago. He's like does a lot of like drum and bass music. He was kind of like one of the first like drummers to like kind of start popularizing, trying to play drum and bass music on a live drum kit because it's just insane. His technique's ridiculous. But I remember him saying, because it was like a technique DVD, like a drum technique DVD. And one of the things that he said was that and I'm paraphrasing this, but if you throw a trash can out the window and it lands on the street and makes the exact sound that you wanted, then that was the perfect technique.
Yeah.
And not a lot of super, nerdy drum DVD quotes have stuck with me throughout my career, but that's something that really, that really has. And I don't know. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because it seemed like you were kind of saying that a minute ago.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I think that's totally true. I think there's like there's no single way that's going to be like necessarily better than another way. And Jojo also doesn't throw trash cans out the window all day long trying to like get it to sound right. Like just because it can doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing to like use as a like primary approach, right? So I think those two things are really important to like hold, that yes, we can make a record in any possible way and it can be a good record. And also some ways are just have higher ceilings and are more musical than other ways most of the time. And so, yeah, you have to know both of those things. And also there's like economics at play. There's logistics at play. There's so many factors. Like getting 8 like world-class musicians in a room together with an engineer and a producer to make a record is kind of expensive, So like there's like a barrier to entry for that like, I totally understand. So, not everyone has the like resources to like pull that off. But I do think it's important to like at least acknowledge that, because I think there's this other idea floating out there that like it's 2024 and you don't need that anymore. Like you can just use the sample pack and you can just like do it one at a time and like just play that bass part until it's perfect. Actually, forget playing it until it's perfect. Just play it 40 times and then comp it until it's exactly right. That's just as good. Quincy Jones wishes he could have done that on Thriller. I disagree with all of that. I think that is not just as good. I think that it's a method that sometimes we have to take and sometimes is a choice for creative reasons, but most of the time it's a choice of necessity. And I think that that's okay. It's okay to do that. I do all sorts of things out of necessity that I know there might be a better way, but like I just don't have the resources to do it that way.
You could coax the singer for like another 2 hours, but they just don't have those 2 hours. So like we're gonna have to tune a couple notes,
Totally. So it's like I'm down with every way. I'm down with certainly anything that works is the right thing. And also, like, I don't want to be like a total relativist and just say like, any way that gets there is always the same and is just as good. Because I don't actually think it's like that. I think that, like, outcome is outcome. And if outcome makes you happy, then it's great success. But process is the way we repeat outcomes, right? Like, we can throw a trash can out the window. It might accidentally sound good, but like, we're not going to throw trash cans out the window all day, every day, because that's a horrible process to try to get a good sound.
Phil, don't knock it till you try it. That's all I'm saying.
100%.
Come back on next time after you've spent a week throwing trash cans out windows, and then tell me it's not worth it.
I live on the 9th floor.
Phil.
It's just too dangerous, but otherwise I'm down.
But I do. I mean, I guess because my job and the way I make records is something that I do over and over again. Like, I've become very sensitive to process, and so I just I'm constantly tweaking that process, trying to figure out like, oh, if we do this in this order, like, can we get like an extra 1% of quality? If we do it like this, can we find another 0.5%? And so yeah, I'm process oriented in like making records, but I'm very just outcome oriented in general. Like, whatever gets us. Like, if the process failed and we still got there, then fuck it.
Wow. Yes, it's like you have a process that's it's a guidebook, but it's not a Bible. Yeah.
I try not to be too dogmatic in my approach. I always like to start swinging for the fences. Like, let's try to get it. Let's try to actually get the best possible, highest probability, tallest mountaintop thing we can do. And then if for whatever reason certain things aren't working, we'll just change it. No problem. Oh yeah, 100%. Put the cellist in the ISO booth. Totally fine. Bring out the headphone boxes. I can tell you're just not feeling singing it today. No problem. We're going to overdub the vocal. Like, we'll do what we have to do. Like, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Like, we're not going to force a thing. But I'm probably always going to at least try to do it the way that I know in my experience yields like the highest potential impact.
Yeah. I love it. Carl, do you have any questions? Because I have a couple, but I'm happy to let you go.
I have one that we may or may not keep this in, but this is just something that I feel like of all of the podcasts that have ever been recorded in human history, which is probably a metric fuck ton, right? There's probably gazillions of podcasts. Hundreds, dozens of them. Of the dozens of podcast episodes ever recorded, I feel like nobody has talked about how the length of a breath can totally shape the emotion of the part coming in. Because ever since you mentioned like the conductor idea, like that's something that I can't get out of my head now, because it's totally right. And I think one of the things that I've noticed for myself is that the only times I usually notice breaths in a song, like when I notice it because like something feels off, it's when the length or the placement of the breath feels unnatural. And you were saying about like even the timing of the breath is one thing, but I think even just like a really like short, like kind of gaspy inhale before a legato passage feels so uncomfortable and weird to me. And I think that's something that in knowing that comping is not ideal, but when you're comping vocals, it's like being aware of which breaths to keep, I think is something that is probably not talked about in a podcast before, probably for a good reason, but I felt the need to take that moment right now and say, damn it, breath lengths matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Breath lengths matter.
Those are super common mix notes also. Like I feel like if a artist is commenting on like a breath, it's because it's like a weirdly placed breath. Like that happens all the time. And a lot of times it's because the artist comped the vocal themselves or the, whatever, someone else did the comping of the vocal and they just left a weird breath in for some reason. Because like, yeah, I definitely am listening for that stuff when I'm comping vocals now. I don't know if it was before your episode or after your episode, Phil, but yeah, that's a very common mix critique is that breath that Carl mentioned.
Yeah, I think it all just goes to like the breath is part of the music, and like to try to forget that is to set yourself up for a lot of work and a lot of, and essentially less impact, and so like, yeah, the length of the breath is super important, the volume of the breath. We just did a Billy Martin record in here, Billiemarten. And there's at least one song where like we worked a lot in the room on like one breath with the whole band. It was like, how is this breath going to like set us up for this next section? Because it was like kind of this thing, I think there was like this kind of stop, and then Billy saying something, and then like we were out of time. We weren't using a drum machine on this track, and Billy's breath had to like bring us in and show the time. And like trying to figure out exactly how that worked and how loud it had to be so the drummer could hear it, so everyone could hear it. It was so specific. And like just being in time wasn't right, just being the length wasn't right, and just having the right volume wasn't right. It's like all those things have to happen. When the breath starts, when the breath stops, it's the same as a trumpet note. It's just, they're all the same thing. Once you like are like, oh, it's just another note, then it's much easier to think about. Like, wow. Oh, how do I think about breaths? Oh, well, I don't know. How do you think about breaths? But we all know how to think about a note in a song played by a violin. So like, just think about it like that, and then it's really freaking easy.
Right. It's just like being aware. The same thing as the stomp boxes, right? Like it's just the awareness makes it easy. But like people don't think about this stuff, but you do, Phil.
Yeah. But then when you get into the editing in the stuff, you won't have the awkward breath that the singer's like, oh, wait a minute, can you take that out? And if the singer's cutting vocals on their own, these are things you can mention to the singer before they go and do that on their own. You can say, hey, by the way, I know you're about to record vocals in your bedroom next week. By the way, breaths are really important. We're going to leave them all in and make sure you're breathing at rhythmic times. When you go back and listen, I want you to listen to those breaths and make sure that they're carrying the rhythmic conversation forwards in the song. I bet you'll get a different set of tracks back from the singer if you mention that to them.
Yeah. That goes back to the process, right? Like you say, you're constantly tweaking your process. So you're living the life and you're learning and you're applying those lessons every time,
Yeah, I should have a document that I send people for home vocal tracking that talks about
Sounds like
this.
a good ebook to get.
I have a lot of documents. If you work with me, you get like lots of documents because a lot of the stuff I have codified to some extent, but I need to. So, the vocals at home doesn't happen a lot, so I don't have a good document on it. But if I need to write one, and it needs to talk about this.
It sounds like you're going to get like a doctorate, like later in your life, just because people will feel like giving you one.
on breath philosophy.
Amazing.
Well, okay. If you were going to get your doctorate in breath philosophy and you had to give your dissertation on your favorite breath in music, do you have one? Like, is there one that like really sticks out to you? Because there has to be something, like some moment in your listening career, right? That you had that eureka moment where you're like, oh shit, these breaths really do matter.
I'm so sorry to say I don't have one. But and I think the reason is because like I could go find some for sure and we could put it in the notes of the podcast. But
Phil's breaths playlist.
I do think that when the breaths are really good, they are invisible to the conscious mind. So I'm not like, oh my God, I love that breath. Although, if I'm listening in a more critical way, I can pick up on them. I mean, Michael Jackson's, basically every single thing he's ever done is amazing breathing. So I mean, that like just comes to mind right away, but I'm sure there's a lot of amazing breaths. I know Adrienne has some great breathing, Adrienne Lenker.
Awesome.
On her records. I could find some specific breaths, I'm sure, to flag.
Amazing. Yeah.
Make like a super cut of just your favorite breaths and songs.
Oh yeah. Well, the
montage.
There's that Jan Jelinek record where he cut up all the inhales prior to I'm probably going to get this wrong, but there's this record, and I can find you the name of it. It's from like 4 or 5 years-ish ago, and he took all these interviews where he like loved what the interview person was about to say, like his favorite quote, and then he took the breath right before that, and he just took all of those moments, the breaths right before the really powerful idea was expressed, and then he took those breaths and he put them in in some like kind of generative system that he built, and in using that, it's like this whole like experimental conceptual piece. It's really cool. If you're not already a Jan Jelinek fan, go dig deep. His discography is unbelievable. But this particular record is maybe the most out in some ways, but really cool. And you really hear all the breaths. I mean, it's amazing. And then each song I think is titled by the person who's doing the breathing. So it's like Lady Gaga.
This is so meta.
Yeah. So cool. Wow. So cool. So those are some of my favorite breaths. I mean, Jan supercut it for us.
That's amazing.
We will definitely put that in the show notes because I want to listen now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I got most of it. Right?
This has been such a like niche conversation about breaths and like musicality. I want to ask you, I want to get like a little bit geeky before we head into the sort of the more, interpersonal part of the conversation. Just in terms of like mic setups, you were telling me all about like condenser microphones and capturing bleed and recording to capture bleed. Has anything changed? Any updates? Anything, or any new mic techniques that you've been really digging recently?
I mean, not really. I'm still just into like put a nice mic in mostly an Omni near a nice performance and watch everything work is kind of where I'm at. I mean, I've got some nice new mics since we last talked that I'm excited about. I got some Neumann U397s, which I've been very excited about. I got my Neumann KM74s back. Those are cardioid. They sound great. I got a pair of B&K 4003s that I've yet to use, but I'm going to probably use them next week, and I'm really pumped. And those are really nice Omni small diaphragm condensers. I've been using the 4004s for a long time, but I've been really interested in the 4003s, which are a little quieter noise floor. So that should be fun. Miking, I've kind of just not really doing anything different. I do take a lot of direct. I record direct a lot. It's like Omni and direct are my two favorite sound sources.
Motown.
I do a lot of contact miking these days. I got a couple of those, I forget what they're called, the ones everyone has that are like too expensive, but I used to go in like an Altoids box, and now they go into a bigger box. I want to say Submarine, but I don't think that's right. What are they called? Zeppelin. Zeppelin.
I'm like, this is going way over my head. This is like a piezo
Zeppelin
mic.
Contact mics the Zeppelin contact piezos are amazing. They're really good. They are a little expensive, but I mean, not that expensive. It's like $100 or something for contact mics. It's kind of crazy, but they do sound really good, and they have a little preamp that's like dialed for them, which I think is kind of their big selling point. I use those a lot. Put those all over the place. Put them on acoustic guitars, on basses. Put them on the piano. Put them on drums. Put them everywhere. I've been recording with those a lot. Actually, Mike Haldeman, who I work with a lot, has been putting them on like we were putting them on guitars here, and then he bought a couple, and now he puts them on all the time. So now I get a lot of them because he just always has them on. And it's really cool because they also like when he is playing with them, he's like, it's like picking up his like skin rubbing on his guitar like a lot. And so there's all this extra sound in his tracks that are like kind of like a breath. They're like the motion before, after, and during a phrase, right? As he prepares his body to execute that phrase. And I find them to be very nice, very lovely.
Wow.
These extra little clicky, they're very clicky and squeaky. Yeah. So I'm into those kinds of things these days.
Like everything that you're saying is like the opposite of like the sterile recording, you know? Like I think when people start, they just feel like they need to make these perfect sounding records, that every single thing is cleaned up. There's no noise. I was just like listening to a little bit of the Adrian Lenker record before we got on the call. There's so many noises like in the background. Like it's like a noisy record, you know?
Mostly
like,
noises.
Yeah. But it gives it an ambience, and it gives it like, you know, something that people can hold on to and I don't know, relate to maybe a bit more. So I think that's like a big lesson.
That works across. I think that works across any kind of music. I don't think that's like particular to like a folk genre or like something that's trying to be like hyper real or something. Like I think you can take like super processed electronic music and give it noise. And in fact, like all the classical electronic music has tons of noise because it's all recorded with noisy analog equipment and noisy analog recording means. So I think that like noise is so important in everything, and the more we remove it, I mean, we do it at our own peril, and it's this weird thing because like listening. I mean, we talked a little bit about listening last time, but there's this weird thing when you start listening critically and you're listening close and you're listening for like the purpose of improving, like quote unquote improving something. You're in a very odd listening stance. That's like so weird. Like who listens to music like that? Nobody. And so the decisions you make when you're listening like that, you should be suspect of. And when we're listening like that, that's when we're like, what's that buzz? Hey, what's that squeak? Hey, what's that hiss? Oh, let's take that out. I'm listening really closely and I don't like that. But if you aren't listening really closely like that, those things change. You will feel very differently about them. You might still not like them, but it's very useful to understand that critical stance is very misleading and easily destructive, I think, to the creative process. No matter, again, really, this is not genre specific at all. And yeah, I'm always trying to like knock myself out of a critical listening position. I'll like do a lot of listening. You know, if I'm doing a lot of mixing, you know, I'm mostly mixing Pro Tools, 99.99%. And Pro Tools on my computer, and I also have an internet browser and my iMessages on here, thank goodness. So I'll do a lot of listening, just like literally reading Boston Celtics news and chatting with my friends on text. And like that seems to be a pretty good way to like get out of that critical listening environment and be able to make like maybe some better decisions. Like, you know, if I'm chatting with someone and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, what's that loud piano? That's a useful piece of information. Whereas if I'm listening really close, I'm listening to the vocal, trying to like dial in, I might not even hear that loud piano come in. I might be like, oh, this piano sounds great. I would be wrong in that case.
Yeah, I think something I would do that's kind of similar is I like doing the car test while I'm driving, not while I'm just sitting in the parking space where it's like I want to not be able to hear the definition of the low end. Like I want to hear, like I'm driving 50 miles an hour and you just hear the whole time, and it's like, okay, if there's anything, if the music is like at like a level that I can have a conversation over it, and there's the road noise and the wind noise, and something sticks out at me, then I know it's an issue. But if I play it there and I don't notice anything, then I know that then the mix is probably done.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that like the car test, Right. I think the car test has like taken on this weird mythical thing where it's like, it's about like, oh, you got to have the 96 Toyota Corolla, but don't get the upgrade sound system. And then like, you got to like make sure to disconnect the rear speakers. And that's how you can tell where the snare drum should be or something. Like the car test is not about the sound of the car. It's about the position of the listener's brain. So like, I love this idea about like driving. Also driving, it's not even about the sound of the road. It's really about like the like attention you're paying to driving.
Right, yeah, right.
Like that's even more impactful to your perception of the mix than the wind noise masking the hi-hats, right?
Yes.
So like, and so I'm like always trying to think like that and like, you know, just trying to like put yourself in like a bunch of odd positions. Like you can have the car mix experience without being in a car. Like you can do it in a bunch of different ways. Like play the song out of your phone on the other end of the room while you're chopping the onions for dinner. Like, you know, now you got your onions done while you were at work and you got good mix notes. Like this is very good.
I have a Bluetooth speaker fan light thing in our bathroom. So like, and it sums to mono. So like listening to mixes from the ceiling speaker in mono while I'm showering is another great thing. Where it's just like, I was like, how can I make it as how can I make the listening environment as imperfect as possible? But also, and I think go back to the car test, and you were saying it's like it's not about the physics of the car; it's more about the mentality, and it's that the familiarity that you have being. It's not about being in the car; it's about you being in your car that you've listened to thousands of songs on. Yeah, and I think like I don't know if we have any listeners that do plugin development, but like when I see people selling plugins that it's like, oh, you can hear what it sounds like in a car. It's like it is like the dumbest bullshit I've ever seen because it completely misses the point.
I think I was just talking about this on another interview, this exact thing. I was talking about how like the car test historically is about comfort and you're having a place that you know what music sounds like because you always are listening to music there. But depending on where you live and what you're doing, like that's not necessarily true like anymore. Because the place that is actually your headphones, right? So and it's not even your like studio headphones, it's your like walk around headphones. So I think the walk around headphones is the modern car test equivalent insofar as it's the place where you listen to music there the most, therefore it's the place to check your mixes.
And they have a smaller carbon footprint.
Smaller carbon footprint, yeah. You don't have to burn the energy driving around. Yeah, I really think car test really means like, place you're familiar with. And that's the thing you should be seeking out is familiarity. And also like, I guess there's one other factor, which is not studio. So place you're familiar with, not studio would be the like two important things, I think. If you're like, oh, I want to have that experience, that's just find those. Familiar, not studio, and you're good.
And I think AirPods are particularly good for that because everybody owns AirPods, or at least everybody in Western countries owns AirPods. So you're just
I don't.
Oh, except for Carl.
Well,
you know,
we're going to send you one now.
Well, first let's talk to Apple about sponsorship, and then we can talk about that. But yeah, one step at a time, people. But yeah, like so many people have AirPods. Truth is, I don't use my AirPods anymore. I use something else. But yeah, like that's just what a lot of people are going to be hearing. So, and you could be hearing the exact same thing when you're testing your mix in a random environment or a different environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always mixing on my AirPods. I mean, I'm mixing from Pro Tools on AirPods all the time.
Really?
Yeah, didn't we not talk about this in episode 183?
Maybe we did. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been too long. It was a lifetime ago.
Oh yeah. I'll be in AirPods for hours. I mean, it has like 50 milliseconds of latency, so like kind of shouldn't be automating with it on, but I just fucking do it. Who cares? Yeah. I just use Mix to Mobile, go right to my phone, and then throw my AirPods in. Now I'm like right off of my monitor output on Pro Tools, and I'll just pop around and then take the AirPods out. And now you're on your phone, and so I'll mix off my phone direct. Because I don't love. I mean, I do love. I value both, like the leave the studio and listen because things sound different. But I also value like I really value like listening on my AirPods and being able to make a move in the mix at the same time. I love mixing on the AirPods a lot.
So would you argue that the iPhone is the new Auratone? I mean, if the AirPods are the new car test.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think it's important to have all sorts of like frequency limited listening options in your studio. But if you only have two, they should be your speakers and your iPhone.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think iPhone also exaggerates like mids, right? Like high mids are exaggerated on the iPhone. It's not just that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's exaggerating it as far or it's just like that's all it really makes. Right. So like it just doesn't have the load. But you know, if you can't hear the kick on your iPhone, that's not good. You know, and it's really easy on your big mains to make some big subby boomy kick that feels amazing, and then you go flip to your iPhone, and you're like, fuck, there's no more kick. It's not the iPhone's fault. Like you need to make the kick work on the iPhone too. So iPhone's great for that. Great for, I mean, balancing. I mean, you can balance a mix way faster coming out of your iPhone speaker than you can coming out of your mains. I guarantee that's true for everybody. Just because we're all working with the same hardware here and the old brains and ears.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. That's a really good tip.